everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. I am your host, Marla Martenson, and today I'll be talking with Paul Selig. Paul is considered to be one of the foremost spiritual channels working today. In his breakthrough works of channeled literature, I Am the Word, the Book of Love and Creation, the Book of Knowing and Worth, the Book of Mastery, the Book of Truth, and the Book of Freedom. So you guys, look at this. I always like to hold up all of these books because it's just like unreal. Paul has recorded an extraordinary program for personal and planetary evolution as humankind awakens to its own divine nature. He also offers channeled workshops internationally, which I have had the privilege to be at one a few years ago in LA. He serves on the faculty of the Omega Institute, the Kripalow Center, and the Esalen Institute. As a noted educator, he served on the faculty of NYU for 25 years. He directed the MFA in Creative Writing program at Goddard College, and now he serves on the college's board of trustees. He lives in New York City, where he's coming to us now. Welcome back to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, this is great. So we've got the new book, the Book of Freedom, and you guys, there's all this amazing work. I'm going to put the link to the first show that we did where you tell your whole story, but for people who are not familiar with you, can you give kind of the cliff notes of how this happened? Because coming from a professor, you're not a woo-woo guy, and then now we see, so much interest in this and people trying to open up to do what you do. So how did it happen to you, just briefly?
I was raised an atheist. I finally hit a wall when I was about 25. I began looking for something more out of sheer necessity. And I had an experience that, left me seeing little lights around people. And then I studied a form of energy healing and found out that I could hear for people when I had my hands on them. So the whole time I was a college teacher, which was a quarter of a century, I was doing a little group privately in my apartment. And then about 10 years ago, the guide started dictating books through me. So now there are, 6 in print and a 7th coming. And this is now what I'm doing. But I'm a radio, and I work with these guides that are teaching through me. And I have this odd ability to step into other people and hear them telepathically as well. So if you think of me as a switchboard or a radio, it's the easiest way to understand what I do.
Right. It's incredible because when I was at your workshop, there was one point where we got to come up and talk to you about something that we were worried about or something, and I was upset about my work, my clients, and you kind of turned into, you looked like me, and then was saying what I was thinking and that what I said many times, and it was, you really got into, you can get right into the person and their issues. It's unreal. And you said that even your face will look like the person that you're tuning into.
Often when I channel, sometimes my eyes run bright blue. I have, hazel eyes, but when I step into other people, I've been known to take on their mannerisms, their facial expressions. I mean, these are people that I haven't met. So if you'd ask about your sister, who has a stutter, I might have tuned into your sister and started to stutter. It just seems to be how I tune in and the effect that it has on my system.
Right, and I think would be great is to use this for couples who are really having issues in their marriage because you always blame each other and you really don't know what's going on underneath. So that would it seems kind of like, well, you're getting in there into some privacy of somebody else, but it can help the other person to get clarity, right?
Yeah, I work with couples on occasion. I prefer to work with the couples at the same time. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes I read for one partner and I tune into the other partner, and the other partner hears the recording and goes, hey, wait a minute, then they book a session too. And then I'm kind of in the middle. But it does tend to be helpful, and, the guides aren't judgmental, and I'm certainly not. But, I'm hearing different aspects of people when I tune in. I'm brokering a conversation that seems to be happening at a higher level, so the people don't even need to be in the room in order for this to occur and to be effective.
Right. That's fascinating. And do you still do private sessions? Because on your website, it looked like you're booked up for a long time.
I still am doing them. I think regular sessions are booked through the beginning of April or something like that, and priority sessions are usually more available, but we don't always advertise them,
Right.
until a few weeks before. But no, they're gettable, and we'll be putting up more sessions, I'm sure, in the next few days because that's what happens when we book up. I travel a lot with my work, so I don't do as many privates as I used to, but usually about 3 days a week I'll devote to speaking with people over Skype and working with them on my phone.
Right. How now? Talk a little bit about how your life has changed. You started channeling in a living room and still teaching. And so, what does it look like now, so many years later, since about a decade in?
I mean, it's only been 10 years since the first book was channeled, and only 3 years since I left my academic positions and had really committed to doing this full time. I was doing it pretty much full time while I was holding down my other jobs, and that wasn't fair to the other jobs, and finally it was just too much for me physically to manage. So I'm enjoying it now. I think I had to grieve my life in academia. I loved a lot of it, and I was a good teacher, and I enjoyed it, which is why I did it for so long. And I'm still teaching, but in a different way. The guides are the real teachers that work through me. I always have to tell people, I'm not a spiritual teacher, I'm not a guru, I'm a channel, and I sit in the chair and I take dictation, but at least I'm still getting to have that interchange with people that I used to get. So it's a different life, and it's exciting, and I'm enjoying the travel, and, I'm meeting a lot of wonderful people, through this work. And it's interesting to me because when I first started, and people didn't really know what I do or how I worked, and I'm not the easiest channel to listen to or watch because of the odd method of speech that comes through. But now that people have sort of gotten the hang of it, I'm not having to excuse it or explain it. If you don't want it, you don't have to come. I don't have that investment of trying to prove anything, which is a nice relief. And it's an exciting journey to be on. I'm grateful for it.
Yes, I follow you on Facebook, and you're always in some airport or landing somewhere new or on a plane or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's amazing. And so, coming from a background of being an atheist, and then this stuff starts coming through in these guides. At first, were you like, "What in the hell is going on?" Or did you accept this information readily, or did it take a while?
It took a while. I mean, when I first started hearing, I was doing energy healing. And I was volunteering at a center in New York City. I had just studied healing, and I'd gotten this call to volunteer. And it was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and people were dying all over, and these centers were popping up. And it was something that I could do, And I found when I had my hands on people's bodies, I started to get information for them, for the client. And I used to feel what was going on in people's bodies, I've had hot flashes. I know what it's like to feel pregnant. All these weird things were happening in those years and still do. But the information I was getting was always for other people, so it could be proven out. I wasn't getting information for myself. I wasn't operating that way. And so I had some context for clairaudience or psychic hearing when the channeling began. But the way that I channel now, which is lecture, the guides are speaking entire books through me that are then recorded, that didn't come until about, 2008, because I used to smoke cigarettes, and when I smoked cigarettes, I was channeling, but I was highly diminished, and I didn't even know how diminished my system was. When I quit smoking, that's when the lectures began, and they haven't started. So I'm still developing as far as I can tell, and I hope I always continue to.
Wow, that's interesting. And did the guides tell you better quit smoking, or did you just feel like it was time to quit?
They said we would like to continue working through you, but you're going to have to deal with this.
Right.
And the next day I stopped.
Wow. And what about alcohol? Do you enjoy any wine or beer, or you don't do any alcohol?
I left that stuff behind in 1987. So, and that's when the psychic stuff kicked in. That's when I started to open up. So I think as somebody who was innately very sensitive, I have used anything one can possibly use to sort of suppress or diminish or protect this sensitivity. So booze was great, and then that didn't work. And, I was a 4-pack-a-day smoker when I was a smoker. So That didn't work. Yeah, yeah. And
Boy.
now, I just like a piece of cake too often. But other than that, it's mostly under control. So, that's how I seem to be built. My central nervous system seems to be part of what's used for me to be
Yes.
able to feel and hear and have these experiences. And when that part of me is numbed, I'm less available to it. It's more comfortable in some ways, but it's not effective for what I do.
What
So I
about
can't.
what about coffee? Because I have a hate love hate. I do a lot of. Is that, oh, you're having a coffee? Okay.
That's like, yeah, whenever I channel, I've got two iced Americanos or two
Okay,
iced
good to
Starbucks
hear that that's not going to
right
hinder
by
our
my
psychic
side.
abilities, right?
I haven't given up. That may happen one day, but it
So,
hasn't yet.
Paul, I've noticed in the last few years that there are more and more people who identify themselves as psychic mediums and healers and channels. It seems like everybody I talk to is connecting with angels. And, like a decade ago, you were one of the few that was out there.
Mhm.
And now you can go on YouTube and see everybody's channeling Jesus and everybody. So what do the guides say about this, or you? I mean, are we opening up now as a, what's going on with that? I mean, is it just like an interest, or is there something
I don't
deeper?
know. I mean, they don't speak about other channels, They really don't. I mean, they say that, they're teaching through me in a specific way,
Right.
and they're not coming through in the same way through others because they're bringing through a body of work,
Mm-hmm.
is building one book upon the next. So that's how I'm being worked with. I can't speak to how others are being worked with because I really don't know. I tend to make a distinction between what I call channeling and what other people can call channeling, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people are calling anything that feels inspired as channeled. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
channeled this painting, I
Right.
channeled the song, I was channeling this whatever. And I think inspiration is amazing and valid and wonderful and high. To my mind, channeling is a little different. I mean, it's really taking dictation.
Mm-hmm.
So the books that come through me aren't edited.
Right.
There's I don't get to go back and fix it and rearrange the sentences and cut the paragraphs. The only thing that was cut in the book that's coming out next was the guides actually, because the last couple of books were done publicly in front of audiences.
Mm-hmm.
The guide said to somebody in the first row, please be quiet. You're interrupting the teaching, and this is not in the book. So
Right.
that's the only thing that was excised, was telling
Right.
somebody to shut up. I do feel that we all have capacity. I don't know if everybody has capacity to channel, but I also don't know why anybody would want to. I mean, channeling in its truest sense really is taking dictation. It's stenography.
Right.
It's not that sexy. And being a psychic and getting to interpret is actually a bit more fun, because when I work psychically, I'm more involved. If I say I'm seeing a man in a raincoat and, he says, he keeps talking about fish, you're going to say, oh, that's the guy I went out with last night. We went to a fish restaurant and, he choked on a bone. I mean, then it's fun for me,
Right.
because there's interchange. When I'm channeling, I'm just taking dictation. I do feel that people are opening up. They're often opening up in my workshops, and it's very exciting to be party to and to watch that happen. I tend to be a little more cautious around the names that people attach to. Sometimes I hear about people that are channeling a long list of celebrity angels and ascended masters, and I kind of think, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about the information and the integrity of the information, or the truth of the information coming through. The guides that I work with are called the guides because when my ex found out I could do this, used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that.
Right.
They have another name that they speak with, and they speak to on occasion. But it's not about sort of the personality cult around, high beings. It's really got to be about the teaching that comes through, at least as far as I'm concerned. But my guides are teachers, and not everybody who's channeling is doing that. They're doing other things, which is perfectly fine.
Well, it's so interesting you brought up that a lot of channelers are channeling these celebrities, and that they have channels just for that. Freddie Mercury and Robin Williams and Princess Diana. Now,
That's not channeling. I didn't know people were doing that. That's a form of mediumship, if in fact they're doing it.
Okay. Oh, yes.
And spiritual mediumship, if in fact they're working authentically.
Okay, they're getting the information from them, and they're asking questions. Like they have an interviewer asking Freddie Mercury questions, and then they're
Well,
giving it
that would be a
mediumship.
form of spiritual mediumship. I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, that's astral. That's lower level stuff.
Oh,
And I
okay.
suppose you can. Well, it's not lower level bad. I mean, the guys that I work with sort of are operating beyond their teachers. You know,
Right.
they're teaching spiritual growth. Now, I'll give you an example. My grandma, who was a nice woman, was married 4 times. And if I want to, she's not necessarily who I want to get information from about how to be in a happy relationship
Yeah.
on the other side. You know, she didn't do too well with that. That's not to say that I can't tune in at that level and have that broadcast.
Right.
What's coming through me, but I would think of that more as a form of spiritual mediumship, which I think is a great skill for those who have it. I'm actually not talking to dead people. That's not what I'm doing. You know, some of the guys that I work with say that they've been informed, but it's not like I'm talking to my dead Uncle Alex. You know,
These
that's
are
not
high beings. High beings.
Yeah. So when I was saying celebrities, I was saying, you know, there can be attachment, I think, to the great names. And I think that that's fine. I think, you know, Course in Miracles, I understand, although I haven't read it, was delivered by the consciousness of Jesus, I've been told. And I think, well, that's terrific. But I think that we can, as a culture, get attached to the importance of the names or the glamour attached to them. And what's important, and all I really wanted to stress, was the quality of the information and the teaching coming through.
Right, and I watch a lot of those because it's so fascinating, but then I'll see a few different people channeling Jesus, and they'll have different answers. Some will say he had no kids, some say he has 5 kids, some say he was didn't die on the cross, and then I'm like, well, then is this even real? And then it gets
I don't know why I mean, this is just me, and I don't want to be critical of anybody else, but, you know, if I'm going to channel Jesus, or if I'm going to tune into that level of consciousness, I'm not doing it to find out how many kids were had.
Right.
I want to understand the teachings and realization of God. It's kind of like, you know, it's where it gets dumbed down and diminished, and I personally don't think, my guides couldn't care less whether Princess Di was bumped off by the Illuminati. That's so, not their thing, you know? Right. So anything that's sort of operating at that level, I think, is probably a bit lower, and I'm not going to deny what other people are doing.
Right.
I'm just going to say, you know, if you can imagine that there's a million television stations to watch or radio stations to play, some of them are going to be, you can watch the porn channel, you can watch, Masterpiece Theater. It's really up to you. And it's not to say that one's better than the other, but what do you want to be taught by? Right. That's how I put it.
And I think it's just our curiosity, because these things that we're told in the Bible and all that, I think we just want it. Wouldn't it be great to really know, is it really accurate, or what really happened? So I think that's probably...
Yeah, I think there is fascination there. I think that, I don't know, I mean, it's nothing my guides speak to. They do speak to the Jesus teaching quite a lot in the last couple of books. But, the guides say that the teaching that they're bringing through is a very, very, very old teaching. And, most of the religions that we know of actually had their basis in this. And what's happened with organized religion over thousands of years has distorted the original teachings. Right. So, I think the curiosity is fine. I think people are invited into this stuff through many, many different kinds of doorways. And I think paranormal interests and occult interests are one way. And I think that, that's one way into a very vast room where there's a lot more available than that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, the Book of Freedom, it's just so great. So, I was watching your interview with Michael Sandler, and he was talking, his wife is pregnant, and he was talking about, is now a time to bring a child into the world? And I often think about that too. I never had kids, and I thought, why would I want to bring a kid into here? There's chemtrails in the sky, there's wars, now the country is so divided, they're making the anger all about politics, and some people are, you can't be my friend if you voted for this person, and it seems to be accelerating. But so talk a little bit about that, about the freedom from that. The book is all about freedom and freeing ourselves are we shifting? Because a lot of intuitives and psychics and everything, spiritual teachers say, well, the world is moving into like a 5D and people are awakening and things are going to change, but then what we see is kind of chaotic. So,
well, I think what we're seeing is what's been there that's now being revealed. You know, in the Book of Truth, which the guides dictated a couple of years ago, it's the book that preceded the Book of Freedom in the series, they said what's about to happen is that everything that's been buried in the backyard is about to be revealed. And that's what was buried 5 years ago and what was buried 5,000 years ago. And all of that stuff that's been stuffed down and hidden is about to be seen. And if you look at a backyard that has become an excavation site, it's not going to be very attractive. But things don't get healed until they're brought to the light. You know, and what we've done as a culture, I think, is mask an enormous amount of inequality, an enormous amount of prejudice and racism and classism. And, you know, I think we've done that very successfully up to a point. And right now, it's fairly impossible to keep doing that. It's in our faces. And the fact that we're complicit and party to all this stuff and always have been is something we're going to have to look at if we want to change. The guides I work with say again and again and again, you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. And they say the consciousness that you hold, you individually and everyone, is informing what it sees. So to claim somebody is evil puts you in accord with evil, and that's the level of vibration. The real action now seems to be to become willing to lift beyond the old way of seeing, which is seeing in separation. The guides say again and again and again, what you damn damns you back.
Right.
You know, when you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. So yes, we are seeing it all over the place, and we're being invited to take sides. But the guides say, you know, the action of fear is to claim more fear. They said, look at every choice you've made because you were afraid and see what it got you. And you'll see that it's more fear. So we can continue in this way and probably blow ourselves up once and for all, because war, the guides say, is generally based in greed, and generally greed is another mask of fear, the belief that there isn't enough, and you have to have more, and you have to conquer others. That's all fear-based thinking, and we have a country that I think has been a conqueror. You know, the guides said in I Am the Word that we had an opportunity post 9/11 to really re-understand ourselves as a model for change. But if we continued on our path of needing to dominate, we would be in for some tough lessons. And I suspect we may be getting some of them. But I think it's opportunity, and it must be seen that way. You know, things don't change until they're seen. And, you know, we're getting to see all of it, warts and all right now.
Right, and it's in with this political thing, and you know, here I'm a matchmaker, and I've never had in my 17 years of matchmaking have to ask each person, well, what's your political leanings? Because there's people who will not date somebody if they voted for Trump, they will not date a liberal, they will not, and I've never seen that before. And the way you speak to, there's such a big portion of people who hate the president so much that the horrible things they say about him and just hammering day after day after day and the horrible memes, it feels so awful to me. It just feels so unsettling, and we've never seen that before. It used to be okay. I don't care for that president, but you wouldn't see it at this. You know, you'd have your preferences.
I think it's been there. I think it's exacerbated by many things now. I mean, my guides don't speak directly to politics.
Right.
But when I was asked about this, it was in an interview with this guy, J.P. Sears, who went directly to it. And they said, what's going on now? And they said, well, imagine a bed where the covers are being pulled back and you're getting to see the bed bugs that have been there. You know, the vermin that has been there. We're really getting this opportunity right now. And that wasn't about him. It was about the entirety of the situation. Now, this whole belief in separation, which is what you're talking about, is something that guides are addressing directly. The personality self, the small self, they say, believes itself to be separate, knows itself in separation, and that's fear-based. Until we can really get past the idea that if there is a God, or whatever you want to call God, it must be everything. And in everyone, not just the people we agree with, like, want to hang out with, it still must be there. We're going to keep killing each other off, and building walls to separate us from other people, and there's nothing in any true spiritual teaching that I've ever encountered, and I'm not a religious scholar at all, and I'm not even that well read when it comes to metaphysics and esoterica. There is nothing that I've ever read that encourages us to hate our neighbor, and if you go to Christianity, the simple message is love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
And my guides would probably say the divine in them is as present as the divine in you, but you're looking at the mask or your idea of who somebody is through this lens of who you think you are, which is separate. And we've got to move beyond that if we're going to get anywhere.
Do the guides say, like, we're, because I've heard some spiritual teachers say, so, like, we think we're like the fingers, like, okay, these are all separate, but then if you look down here, it's connected. So, like, God is here and we are all, a finger of God, a branch.
Well, yes. I mean, they've never used that example, but I wouldn't disagree with it. I mean, the guides say that we have been born into a belief system that would say if there is a God, it's up there in a cloud somewhere and we're stuck here in the mud doing our best.
Right.
And the guides I work with are saying, guess what, everybody? God is the mud. And he's also the person, or it's also the person you can't stand. In 12-step land, if anybody who's listening to this is a 12-stepper, there's this really radical line in that big book where they say God is everything or God is nothing. What's our choice to be? And for the most part, we have a very convenient idea of God, which we use when it serves us, and if it's going to get us what we think we want.
Right.
And part of the problem with the New Age is people seem to think that God is some, great big retailer, who wants to give you everything that you want. And, it's fine if that's your way into this, but until you start to do the real work, which is the realization of the inherent divinity in everyone, including the people you can't stand, you're really just contributing to the problem. Do you know what I mean?
I feel
the
that
action of fear is to claim more fear.
Right. So, can you talk about the attunements in the books? Because, how that works? Like, each book has, like, in the Book of Freedom, I am free, I am free, I am free through there.
Yeah.
And I am the Word as I am the Word. So, the
Yeah.
attunements.
The guides work with attunements. They say we're all radios, and the broadcast that we're playing is our consciousness. And our consciousness is what's really calling into form this shared agreement of reality that we're operating with. So we're all living in a shared reality. I know that you're a female, you know that I'm a male, you can see that I'm in a room. We all know what a male is and a female is and a room is because it's part of the collective agreement to be in this form and in this way of being. But we're all radios, and the vibration that we hold is actually informing what we see and is bringing us into a vibrational accord with what is possible. So the attunements, and the primary ones that are worked with in the Book of Freedom are I know who I am in truth, I know what I am in truth, I know how I serve in truth, I am free, I am free, I am free, are actually working with the one who speaks them to attune the radio that he or she is to play the higher broadcast, which is the higher vibrational energy, which is here, seeking its expression, the guides would say, as and through us. So the claim, I know who I am, is as the divine self. Now, I know who I am. I'm Paul. I'm in my 50s. I live in Manhattan. It's the divine self, the I am self, that claims that, the aspect of the creator that is instilled in each of us, the true self. I know what I am means the form taken, the body itself and the expression of the body. I know what I am, which is the divine can't even be separate from this. It is another expression of God. I know how I serve is how the expression is known. So I know who and I know what allows you to express as that, to be an expression as the divine self. The claim, I am free, I am free, I am free, they say is the equivalent to releasing the agreement to be operating in fear and in this sort of shared construct. They say, imagine that there's like a dropped ceiling in your office or in your house. And what you're really doing with this claim, I am free, I am free, I am free, because they say the divine self or the true self expressed as you is free. How could it be anything else? Is the equivalent of sort of punching a hole through the false ceiling to what exists beyond that. And at that level of expression, everything then begins to change. The guides say, they don't talk really about dimensions. Sometimes I wish they would, but they talk about octaves. And they say we're in a shared octave. You think of an octave of music, it's got high notes and low notes, but it's an octave. There are octaves above us. And they say any piece of music or any note can be played in multiple octaves into infinity. The attunements are helping us play the higher note, the higher broadcast, and then through co-resonance, you're calling a higher world into manifestation.
Okay, and fascinating. Now, if you ask them about dimensions, would they answer? I mean, if you say, "Hey,"
I work with their teachers, so
right. So it's more they're telling you what they need.
Well, they're teaching in their language, right. And what they have said very specifically, very often. Well, they have used the word dimension, I think, more in the last year than they ever have, but only as a corollary to the idea of octave. They say that they don't use the language of science because the language of science is limited by the times that we express in. Mm-hmm. So they say in 200 years, we're going to have different names for everything anyway.
Okay.
And the teaching that they're bringing through, they say, is existing beyond time. Right. So the metaphors that they use are often musical. And they're speaking about tone and vibration, and they use music as the metaphor for how the energetic field is in operation.
Yeah, and the word dimension doesn't even feel scientific because all the New Agers use it all the time. Like, oh, I'm channeling from this dimension, or we're moving into this dimension. So it's like a, kind of catch-all phrase now with dimensions.
Well, it's another problem in that people, when I was coming into this stuff in the 80s, when I was young, you'd hear things like, oh, and I wasn't channeling then. I didn't even really believe in channeling very much. I was skeptical about it all. But you'd hear things like, well, there's a Gabriel channeling on the Upper West Side. We go to Brooklyn where Michael's channeling. That's the really hot one. And think about how ridiculous that is. You know what I mean? It's what they used to call spiritual materialism, which is who's got the bigger crystal, or who's working with a higher master. And I don't know if there's any real place for that. I just have to say, and this is just my opinion, and maybe I'm just being a bit of a curmudgeon today, but truth is truth, and I've heard some of the most brilliant spiritual wisdom from people that don't consider themselves in the least bit spiritual and don't even know what a chakra is. You know what I mean? So we can have our tribal speak, but ultimately it's how you live your life. It's how you treat the people around you. It's the compassion that you bring to every act that you can. And it's learning and learning and learning. And that everything that we encounter that stings or that hurts or that's challenging is still an opportunity to grow. That's how I have to look at it if I'm to do this stuff. Other than that, it's about fashion and vocabulary. And I can't show up for that.
It's become kind of commercial. It is,
I think it always has been, in some ways. I just think it gets popularized at different times. And, it's what it is. And I suspect that for many people, it's a way in. When I first entered into this stuff, I was out buying, when I was 25, I was out buying crystals and I was there meditating with them all. I was very excited by the possibilities. Yes. Yeah. And I just moved beyond some of that. And most people who stick with this stuff, because you'll be taught, you will be taught. It's what the guides say. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. Now, it's not that I don't get pissed off at people, but I am taught by that. Right. Because what it does for me is it challenges me to work with my issues. Yes. To release my judgment of other people, even though that's not what I want to do as a personality self. I enjoy it. Who doesn't like to feel a little better than somebody else some days? So it's not, I don't want to imply that other people aren't where they're supposed to be for their own learning.
Yes.
I just think that, this is, there's great potential here for all of us if we can move beyond the superficiality of this stuff to the real truth that must lie beneath it if any of this stuff is to be believed.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, so that's how probably people are awakening in your workshops because of this vibration and the right in the books, and even when you read it, because I think you've said sometimes people will. I love that story about somebody's child. A book was on the floor, and the child went up to it and said, "That's a magic book," or it could feel the.
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was some baby crawled up to the book and said, "That's a magic book," who couldn't read. I guess I saw that on social media because that's how I notice things.
Right. That's awesome.
The books are energetic attunements that work directly with the reader. So it's not, if you look at the reviews, people say, "I'm reading this book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading the book and I'm seeing auras," that kind of stuff. When I do the workshops, and the guides are teaching, they're lecturing and teaching, and they're answering people's questions, either about their lives or about the teachings, but the guides are also bringing through the energy and the attunements to get people working with it. And fortunately, I have to say, this stuff is palpable. So people get to have their own experience of this stuff. Yeah. I have no interest whatsoever in people deferring to me. I don't want it. I don't want to be on a pedestal. I'm trying to find my way through this life just as you are, just as anybody else is doing. And it's not always fun or easy. But the guides seem to know a bit more, and they're giving us something that we can work with ourselves, that will support us in our realization so that we're not dependent on something outside ourselves as we perhaps have been.
So you guys, I did write about my experience in my book, The Buddha Made Me Do It, my spiritual memoir about being in Paul's workshop. So remember that, Paul? I had emailed you and told you, and you said, yeah, you could write it. So that's real fun to read, you guys, because it was so powerful, not only that time when you could know what I was thinking about my business and stuff, but then you had actually approached me and said, "Can I approach?" And you pulled off some darker, lower energies, and standing there, I felt like this whoosh of cold air.
Yeah.
And I could feel like air coming off, and then someone way behind me, because we were sitting in a big circle, said, "Oh, I saw some like gray smoke, mist coming off of you." It was amazing. So anyway,
cold is old. When people release cold stuff, they tend to be releasing things that have been held for a long time.
That's interesting.
And that's always wonderful when that happens, because it can mean there's a real change. Right. Something that's been hindering your expression is no longer there to block it, to hinder it.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Can't believe it. It's all these books, and there's going to be more. So it's just incredible. Yeah. All right, everybody. Paul's links
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Paul's links are below. You can go check out his website and everything he does. And much love, everyone. And thanks, Paul.